Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode of the podcast. I hope you're having a lovely back to school season, new term. And this week we're going to be talking all about jewellery photography, one of our favourite topics, something that's so important for jewellers to master. But particularly we're focusing on jewellery photography using your phone, your smartphone, because of course there's much more complex photography that you can do and you'll get into as you develop in your jewellery business. But loads of the time we're using our phones, and the phones are great nowadays for creating videos and images for our websites, for our social media, for all sorts of things. So it is definitely a skill that we all can improve on all the time. I speak for myself as well. So I'm joined by the wonderful Karen Young today, and we're going to be covering some top tips for improving your smartphone photography. So wherever it is at now, there's always room for improvement. So if you're a total beginner, there's loads that you'll learn today. And if you've been doing it for a while, it'll be a nice kind of refresh. So before we get into chatting to Karen, I also have some exciting news to share with you, which is that we have a brand new photography course with Karen Young herself. Karen is an incredible jewelry photographer and jeweler and many other things as well. And this new course is called Photographing Jewelry Using Your Smartphone. It does what it says on the tin. And it's a really nice starter course for somebody who's new to jewelry photography, who's perhaps not quite ready to really embrace like everything in jewelry photography, because it's a whole thing, it's a whole situation, but would like to take really gorgeous pictures using their phone and would like to learn some techniques and strategies and have some support with that. So that course is out now and it's on a special offer at the moment. It is 50% off, so we highly encourage you to go and get started on the course as soon as possible. Even if you're going to do it in a little bit of time, order it now, because you need to get in before the 20th of September, when the price will go up to its normal rate. So 50% is a huge amount to have off, so you want to take advantage of that. The other thing I wanted to share about, as well as the smartphone photography course and this awesome podcast we're going to get into, is that we have a photo challenge that we are doing together as a community, just to get you started. Again, we know September's always that kind of new term feeling. It can be very easy to get overwhelmed. But we're going to be taking a picture each day and sharing it on social media together as a community. And that's going to start next week, this time next week, Monday, the 16th of September, and run to Friday, the 20th. You don't have to do every day. You don't have to do it exactly the way that we share, but we've got 5 prompts, 5 days, and we would absolutely love to see your jewelry photography. And you can put some of the tips from this session into action. And if you're doing the course, then you can obviously use that to improve it as well. And we would love you to tag us in your photos that you're sharing at Jewelers Academy. And we can tag Karen as well. Why not? She would love to see them too. Karen, welcome. And what's your Instagram that we can tag?
Hi everybody, lovely to be here. My Instagram's at Karen Young Photography UK, so I'm kind of on there, kind of sharing client photos and things like that. So yeah, delighted to be here.
Amazing. Yeah, so give Karen a tag as well, because we love to see what you guys are actually doing with the content that we're putting out there. And I always love to see before and afters as well. Like, this
Yeah.
is what we did before. Looks terrible. Mine usually looks terrible when the lighting's bad and the focus is off, or there's a blue cast or a yellow cast, and then it's like, oh, I've made a few changes and look at it now. So we're excited. It's Jewelry Photography Month. We're getting into it. We're embracing it. It's a great time to update some of your photos ahead of the Christmas sale season. So without further ado, let's get into today's tips. So Karen, welcome. Just for anyone who hasn't met you before, I know that you're around a lot in the community, so I think most people will, but maybe a little introduction and then we can move into our first tip of the day.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Karen Young. I have been a jeweler for, I keep saying a decade, but it's been longer than that now. And I moved during lockdown into more photography for other people. So primarily jewelry, but I do photograph other crafts as well. The focus for me is on handmade artists. And yes, I love sharing what I've learned. I've obviously started from some truly awful photos, and I'm still learning, improving. Everybody is, and I really love sharing so that I can help people maybe skip some of the pain I went through in terms of learning what worked, what didn't work, and things like that. So, and obviously, it's so much easier now to take your own photos than it was back when I started. There's so much more information out there. There's so much more equipment that's affordable, because that was one of the biggest barriers when I started. And actually, just, that ability to share that is really, really helpful and really fulfilling. So,
Absolutely. It's nothing better, is there, than taking just a gorgeous picture of your
yeah,
jewelry that makes it look in its best light. So I think
definitely.
there's the making of the piece, but the actual representing of it is another creative act as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
And so I think once you master some of the jewelry photography basics and you can do that, it's really rewarding. And then
mm,
to be able to share it and get reactions and those kind of things. So
definitely.
where do we start? What is our first tip for jewelry photography using our smartphone, which is a little bit different to video
So
photography?
I think where I always start is light. That I kind of think, regardless of what device you use, what equipment you've got, if you're not using a good quality light, you're always going to struggle a bit more with the resulting images. So that's where I always like to start. Use high quality light. That can be natural daylight. Um, it's harder in winter in the UK, but other countries have much longer windows where you can use natural daylight, and it's free. It creates a beautiful quality with the images. Some of my favorite images of my own jewelry, even looking back, are the ones taken with natural light, because you just, when you get that lighting right, it's just such a beautiful, it creates a beautiful atmosphere. But you may also want to start investing in some good quality LED lights that are calibrated to daylight. So they basically mimic daylight. And this helps us as we go into the darker months. It means you can shoot later in the evening if that's what your schedule allows. I know so many of the community actually have a day job. So having those high quality daylight lights can be really helpful. They don't need to be expensive. That's the great thing. When I first started, photography lights, particularly continuous ones, were big and bulky and quite expensive. There are so many affordable brands now, like Newer or Godox, and you'll find lots on the likes of Amazon, or Essential Photo and things like that, that are really good quality. And you can get them in all shapes and sizes. You can get them small if that you've only got room for a desktop setup. You can get them larger if you want to kind of have those larger lights for those larger scenes. So do your research. We've made some recommendations in the course, but obviously do your research, read the reviews, and really think about the kind of lights that you think will work best for you and the space you've got available and your particular setup, whether you need two, whether you need three. It's important to take that all into account. But the main thing is you want a stand for these lights to go on, be it a tabletop one or a full size stand, because you don't want to be holding the lights. You're going to be doing enough setting the scene up, unless you've got somebody to help you, you're gonna need your hands free, and you want to be able to position the lights, play about with them, but then leave them be, and kind of do the rest. You'll be holding reflectors potentially, as in some cases you'll be holding your phone, so you kind of want your hands free. So yeah, always go back to the light. High quality light, whether it's continuous lights, which works really well for videos as well, so it's a good multitasker, or natural daylight.
Awesome. Great place to start. We want perfect lighting or as much as possible. So natural daylight where we can, or the continuous light, which is really nice, isn't it, Karen? If you're doing like a
Yeah.
collection or something and you don't want the light to change, you want
Yeah.
everything to look the same. So, okay, so we've got our great light. What next?
So I think you need to think about where that light's coming from. And this is where ahead of time it can be, before you start shooting, it's useful to set up a scene, and move the lights around. So depending on the look you're going for, whether it's more of a hard light setup where you do want some of those more dramatic shadows, or whether you want a more soft or romantic, really looking at the scene and moving those lights up and down, and kind of more on the top, or round to the front, just see the difference that makes. And when you're looking at, particularly at the shadows, where your light is positioned makes a huge difference in terms of how those shadows look. So I really encourage you to play about with the lighting before you start shooting. What you'll find is as you do it more and more, you'll find your go-to. You kind of know, okay, for these kind of shots, the lights go here, and for these kind of shots, I position the lights like this. But really playing with that to start with, before you do anything else, can really help in terms of your understanding of the impact light has.
Absolutely. And I think it kind of touches on the patient element, doesn't it, of jewelry photography? And that I think sometimes when we're using our smartphone, we think, oh, this should just be a quick snap and I'm done. It's almost
Yeah,
sometimes it almost makes us feel like it should be really quick and easy. But actually, like you said, spending time to experiment, like
yeah,
give yourself maybe a full hour or even longer to kind of say, this is a photo shoot. Yes, I'm using my phone as the camera, but I'm not just sort of snapping. I mean, we might do snapping away while we're
yeah,
making as well. And like you said, once you've got a nice setup, then you can go back to that because likely, especially if you're using lights, that lighting's not
yeah.
going to change.
And take a photo of your setup. If you find a setup really works for you, take a photo of that setup so you can replicate it. Because sometimes with the best will, particularly if it's been a while since you last, you can forget. So, you've got a phone, you're going to be using it. Take a photo of that setup, so that you can go back to that and replicate that next time as well.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got our lights, we've got them in a good place, we've got our setup. What is next?
So I think once you've kind of really worked on the lights and where they're positioned, that's where you need to really look at the scene and is it exactly the way you want it? Or are there some reflections that you want to sort out and things like that? So that's where you can use reflectors. I like foam board because it's really cheap and you can cut it. So if you need smaller reflectors and larger reflectors, it's cheap and easy to cut up. And when you're done with it, because they do get a bit dog-eared after, you can throw it away, create a new one. So this is where you can position reflectors that will help bounce the light back onto the piece to either remove some of those reflections or lift those shadows if they're a bit too harsh for you. And it also means you're controlling the light a little bit. So, say you only have two lights, actually adding a reflector can just help amplify and bounce the light back in an area where you can't position a light because you either don't have one or it just doesn't quite work. So reflectors are really going to be your friend. If you're getting quite a lot of dark marks on your jewelry, sometimes that can mean just bringing your reflector down at an angle just to help bounce the light back onto the, particularly with shiny pieces. You've got a little bit more grace with matte or textured pieces, but it can really make it pop, and it can be a matter of just watching what happens when you are moving that reflector down, and just stopping where the jewelry starts to pop. So play about with that. As I said, if you buy one piece of equipment, start with foam board.
Absolutely. So foam board for anyone who's brand new is like just like a white piece of paper really, but it's thicker so you can hold it up. And like Karen said, it bounces the light back. So if you're say taking a picture of a really shiny silver ring and you can see your whole self in it because it's so shiny, you don't want to see your whole self in it, then this is where we might bring this in. Or if there's a lot of black, and you want to kind of lift that up a bit. And it's amazing, isn't it? And you show it in the course exactly
Mm,
how people can use it and what
yeah.
angles and what it does. And it's another thing to play around with, isn't it? Because I remember when I first started taking photos of silver jewelry, I was like, there's just loads of stuff in it. There's loads of the whole scene from
Yeah.
behind me was mirrored in the
Yeah,
jewelry.
and you can edit it out, but that you kind of want to get as much right in the shot as possible.
Yeah,
That should always be the aim. So, just something as simple as foam board can help
yeah,
boost
quick,
the light.
easy, inexpensive. We
Yeah.
love it. Okay, brilliant. So that brings us on to tip number 4. What is next?
Clean your camera lenses. It sounds really silly, but if you think about what our phones go through every day, we're handling them, they're in our bags, they're in our pockets. The lenses can get quite grimy, and for the sake of a couple of seconds, just making sure you're using a lint-free cloth just to remove smudges and grime and things like that. You don't want dirt or grime on your lenses, potentially spoiling amazing shots. The camera focus can be quite sensitive, and sometimes if you're missing the focus, it could be that actually there's some grime on there. So just give your lenses a good clean before you start to shoot. And then you don't need to worry about it. But yeah, you wouldn't want to ruin potentially amazing shots with, a slightly grimy camera lens.
Yeah, that is a big one for me. My lens is always dirty, but
Oh,
it's
mine are
as you
awful.
say, Karen. And whenever I go on holiday with my friend who's a photographer, she's always like, Jessica Rose, clean your camera lens before you
Mm,
take a picture of me, because I'll take them and they'll just be slightly fuzzy. It's that slightly like murky.
mm,
I'm like, what's wrong? Why is it not happening? And it just is like night and day. Once you
yeah.
clean it, you're like, oh, that's all that needed to happen. And my camera phone has like three different lenses, so it's
Yeah. Yeah.
you have to clean them all. But it only takes a second and it makes
Yeah.
all the difference. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that one.
Definitely.
Quickly,
Big one. And it sounds so simple, but
yeah.
sometimes it's the simple things.
But I think a lot
Um,
of these things are the simple little, it's like
yeah.
a lot of little stages. You almost need like a checklist to go through and be like, okay, have I cleaned the lens? Have I got this? Is the focus in place? All those things. But speaking of focus and keeping things in place, what is tip number 5?
So I recommend using a tripod, particularly when you're starting out, particularly when you're learning. Um, the reason for this is it keeps your hands free. And if you're having to position lights and position the scene, actually having your hands free just to tweak things makes a huge difference. So I would recommend using a tripod. It helps with getting that focus. It keeps your hands free, and it just helps you just be able to focus on the shots that you're taking rather than the mechanics of it. And ultimately you want well lit, sharp images. And if using a tripod helps you do that, then definitely do that. That's not to say I don't recommend at the end taking your camera off the tripod and trying some different shots. I do that in the studio. I know the shots that I'm aiming for. We'll get to that in another tip. Um, but I will then take my camera off the tripod. I have to whack up the shutter speed because, when I'm taking them on a big camera. But I'm moving around and trying different angles. Remember, photography is meant to be creative, and it helps you find new angles and come up with new images. But to start with, I would recommend using a tripod because when you're starting, you're taking in so many other things, and you want to be still getting those sharp photos.
I think it helps with focus as well, just in terms of your focus.
Definitely.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
this is the shot I'm trying to get, because I am very guilty of sort of being like, this should take 5 minutes. I'll just scooch around and get something. And then I look at them and I'm disappointed. But actually, when I've like mounted my phone in a tripod, I've done my setup, I've done my lights, it's like I'm taking it a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can be like, oh, do I want to go higher? Do I want to go lower? Do I want to be on the level with the jewelry? Do I want more of a flat lay? So you start to sort of think
Yeah.
more about positioning
And
and
it gives you consistency as well. So if you want quite a consistent set of images, then that's the way to do it because when you are freehanding or freestyling, it's hard to get that consistency. So if you do kind of want everything shot at pretty much the same angle, then the tripod is the way to do that
yeah, the what's
because the
it called?
camera's in the same position the whole time.
Spray and pray method of just
Yeah.
taking as many pictures as possible. And I always find it funny because if I've got a tripod and I've mounted my phone and I've got continuous light and I take a picture, it's like it's not going to change if I take it again.
No.
Everything's the same. So whereas we're used to just like taking loads of the same, it's like if there's lots of consistent things in place,
Yeah.
you only need to take one of those and then you can move and try another one or do,
Yeah.
a bit close up and things like that. Okay, brilliant. So we've got our tripod. What is tip number 6?
So I always recommend you check your shots before moving on. So one of the things I see so often is people take a shot, they absolutely love it, but then they realize the focus is at the back of the ring instead of, that beautiful gemstone. And that is kind of because you're tapping, sometimes the focus does miss. So if you're really happy with shot, use your fingers to zoom in and just check everything is exactly where you want it. Sometimes you pick up, oh, there's a nice big hair. Or sometimes you pick, actually, the focus is off. So it's really good to just look at the image that you have captured and look at the position of everything, check the focus, check there's nothing in there, because it's so much easier to remove that hair, or just take another one and get the focus just right, rather than having to then go back and try and recreate it later. So check your shots before moving on, make sure they're sharp, make sure the jewelry looks exactly the way you want it to. Think about, if you've taken the photo, say horizontal, do you want to flip it round and maybe take a portrait one? So just checking those shots and taking the time to do that, rather than snap, 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 um, can really help in terms of the quality output you get from your photo shoot. And I think you learn more when you take that time just to, it's not, you're not sitting there for half an hour evaluating shots. You're talking, a minute. But that minute can, and maybe actually I need to just tweak this one little thing and I'll take the shot again. And things like that. So it's a really good way of, one, learning, but two, making sure that the shots are absolutely the way you want them to.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, checking your work as you go. I mean, it's the same with jewelry making, isn't it? As we go, we're constantly looking and being like, is this, is this right? So we're used to this skill, this technique of
Mm,
regularly checking. And like you said, it'll just give you that information for the next shot. Like, oh, do
yeah,
I want to go closer? Do I want to remove something? Is it too busy? Is it too stark?
yeah.
So kind of just getting our brains in gear, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that kind of ties in probably
With
to
the
the next
next shot,
one.
which is
Yeah.
slow down. A lot of people are want to try and fit as many shots, but then you've got more to kind of review and cull, um, before you find those ones that are little gems. So slowing down a little bit, look at the screen. That is the benefit of devices these days. When I first started, I pretty much had to load them up onto the computer to see what the actual output was. We can see real time what the resulting image is going to look like. We might do tweaks to it, we might crop it slightly, but we can see real time what it looks like. And by slowing down, you can say, actually, I want this as a horizontal image, a long banner image. But actually, I can crop it, will it work as a square image as well? So you want your images to kind of multi work for you. You want them to be able to be used for multiple things in your business, like banners, newsletters, and things like that. So slowing down. And what I like to do is take a shot and really look at it. Sometimes it's hard to see these things by eyes, but when you take a shot, you say, oh, actually, I've positioned that thing and it just looks like there's a big gap of space or something like that. If I just move that in, actually, it looks a lot better composed. Or actually, if I change the position slightly, that'll show more of the detail and things like that. So slow it down and really look at the screen, because that is the biggest advance, I think, in terms of, from when I started to where we are now, is, we can see real time the tweaks that we're making, and, making sure that, visually everything looks as good as it can do.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, yeah, I find it helpful to visualize as much as possible where I'm going to put these pictures. So
Mm,
if I'm doing a shoot and I think, oh, I want this to be on a website, I want this to be, on my product page, and they're all square, they're all going to be square for that, then kind of having that crop in mind for a little bit, and then sort of saying,
mm,
okay, I want these to be for reels and I'm going to use them in portraits and stories, and having that kind of crop in mind helps me with
yeah.
planning the styling. Because if I leave it too broad and think, oh, I just want this for everything, I can't I can't process like what
Yeah.
composition I want. So I guess everyone's brain is different in terms of how they visualize what they're going to do before doing it, but I find that can be quite helpful. And then sometimes there's happy surprises where you're like, oh, I thought this would work better in portrait, but actually it looks really good
Yeah.
in square, or it looks really good
And
as a.
I think as well, having some images where you've got some negative space is really powerful for marketing. So, taking stuff out, leaving that negative space that you could overlay text and things like that. And that's why I say, really looking, we'll get to kind of planning the shoots and things like that, but really look at the shots and put things in, take things out, move the position slightly. And that can all really help just give you images. So I quite often do long banner type images with the stuff in the corner that you can then, kind of either crop down into square, but you can also overlay, your buttons and your text on your website or, things like that. So it can be really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. Great. We are getting through them. So I think we're on number 8, if I
Yep, we
count.
definitely are.
Yes. Okay, awesome. What is tip number 8?
So this is where I want to make photography fun for you again, because a lot of people find it quite stressful, because it's maybe not something that comes naturally to them. It is definitely something you can learn, but it can be quite intimidating and stressful at first. And this is once you've captured those key shots and you've got that consistency of your image, take the camera. Take the phone off the tripod and just take some handheld shots. Some of them will be awful, some of them the focus will be all over the place. But it might just give you some ideas in terms of angles and positions, and can really give you some nice, slightly different shots than maybe you would have thought of. So photography is meant to be creative. So, I do recommend beginners do use that tripod for that consistency to slow down and help you learn and capture those shots. But, before you move on, try some different things, try some handheld shots. And it's easy to move from portrait to horizontal, maybe look at a few short videos and things like that. So yeah, play with it as well, because it all helps with the creative process. And then it helps you plan subsequent shoots.
Yeah, yeah. And it's amazing how the light changes as you move, especially with
Mm,
natural daylight, isn't it? And just sometimes just moving it around to see,
mm,
like you said, we're so lucky that we've got that live view now that we can
mm.
see in real time what's happening. It used to be back in the days of film, you just had to take one and hope that when it came out in like a month's time or whenever you got it developed, that it looked good. So having a play with it is sounds like a good thing to try. Brilliant. And number 9.
Edit all your photos. I cannot say this enough times. Do not just take a picture and, you know, you can take the best photo and it can still just be pimped up, taken up a level in editing. So edit them all. I like Lightroom, so I use the desktop version, but the mobile version is brilliant and particularly good, when you are working on your phone. Um, just check the cropping, maybe brighten them a little bit. You can use it to sort out any of those color casts, particularly with natural daylight. You can get some quite distinct color casts. You can usually sort all of those out in editing and just pimp up the contrast a little bit just to make things pop. So yeah, edit all your photos. It gives consistency. It just allows you to enhance the images slightly. You don't want to edit them to the point that it doesn't look like what it's what you're selling, but you just want to remember some of these camera lenses can show more detail than the human eye can see. So you just want to make sure that you're editing all those images, and the best ones. So go through all the images you've taken and edit the best ones. And then you've got that consistent look and feel, rather than a very mixed bag of images, which you can tell, and it just looks a brand just looks overall more visually impactful if there's consistency across the images, and
Mm.
editing is your way to do that.
Absolutely. And I think culling as well, isn't it? Kind of getting
Yeah,
rid of the ones that you don't want. So you've got this really lovely final set of like, these are the ones I'm going to use. Makes it so much
yeah,
easier when you go into doing your website updates or your socials and things like that. And editing is something that we go into quite a lot of detail in the course as well. So Karen, you kind of cover the editing, don't you, and show us how to
yeah.
use the apps and take us through from start to finish how you edit a piece, because yeah, I can imagine some people listening might think, but how do I edit? How do I make sure that
Yeah,
it
we
looks,
we take everybody through that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's a matter of playing with the apps to some degree, a bit like learning your setups and your lighting and everything like that. It's the same learning curve with editing. But again, because of the way these apps are now compared to 10, 15 years ago, they're a lot more intuitive. They're sliders. So again, you can make a change and you can see instantly the impact that that change has. And you can then just edit to what looks good and what looks real and natural for your setups and your images and your pieces.
Absolutely. So lots of information on how to do that, but also how to do all the setups we kind of go through, don't we, as well? And kind of, yeah, quite a lot of detail on how to put all these things into action. If you're listening and think all of that sounds great, but I'm not really sure how, the course is going to be, a really great resource for you. And last but not least, tip number 10.
Yeah, tip number 10 is plan your shoot in advance. So, the old saying is, you know, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. Um, by doing a little bit of planning, you make the most out of your time. So I think a lot of people just come to a shoot and they're like, I've got these 20 pieces that I need to photograph, and it's kind of all very muddled. And then they get back and go, I've missed that shot, or I didn't take the back of this piece, or so by sitting and having all your pieces and saying, well, I need a close up, I need the back, I want these items shot together, I need a long thin item of these three pieces, I need some category shots for my website, I want a really nice kind of lifestyley one for my newsletter sign up box and things like that. So thinking about the shots you need, the shooting ratios, whether you want long thin, whether you want square, whether you want portrait, um and how they're going to be used both on your website but also your socials and your marketing, can really help make sure that you don't miss anything. So I like having a list. If I'm shooting for a client and I miss a killer shot, then that's not great. So, and it's the same when you're shooting for yourself. You've only got so much time. You want to use that time wildly. So yeah, spending a bit of time thinking about the shots that you need, and the shots that are specific to some pieces. Because for some pieces, you don't need that many shots because it's a standard chain and things like that. But in other pieces, you've maybe made a lot of detail about the back of the piece, and you want to show the profile and things like that. So spending a bit of time planning, and spending that time thinking about for your launches what pieces are going to go together and what other branding elements do you want to bring in and what lifestyle shots do you want to create, because you don't want just product shots, you want some videos and photos that talk about bringing your brand to life, and the story that you want to tell, that kind of will resonate with your audience in terms of the lifestyle that they see for themselves. That's when people buy into brands and things like that. So, spending that time planning so that you are making the best use of your time. And that goes into everything we've talked about in terms of that setup. You want to be shooting for blocks of time and trying to do multiple pieces at the same time, because that maximizes your time. You might not edit them all at the same time, but you've then got that everything was shot at the same time. So yeah, planning your shoot in advance, and the shots you want to take and everything like that can make a huge difference in terms of the use of your time.
That makes a lot of sense. And we were actually chatting on the podcast last week about the fact that there's 16, now maybe 15 weeks until
I
Christmas,
know.
which is a little bit scary, but it's fine. It's fine. We're all fine. Um,
No, I
and
don't know where this year's gone.
well, I saw something the other day and it was like January went very slow, February went very slow, then March, and then April, May, June, July, August
I
just went.
know. I know. And I think as well, when it gets into this time of the year, that's where you do need to be quite strict with your time, because you've got so much going on, the sales ramp up, you still need to be marketing and on social media. So, kind of spending a bit of time every week, I would say, planning how you're going to focus your time to get what you need out of a week or a month, is so, so important, so that you have that time to chill and not get to the point of breaking point.
Yeah.
um because going into that final quarter for us handmade artists and jewelers, it can be very full on.
Yeah. Yeah, and we were talking about now is a really good time to get your photography and bits of video ready so that when you come to do a big marketing push through like October, November, you've got this collateral to work with. So Karen
Yeah.
was talking about planning the shoot, not necessarily editing it all at one time, but having lots of images and bits of video to work from. If you can build that up through September, then come October, November, you don't have to take as many pictures
Yeah.
because you kind of got
Because
the
you will be making, you will be fulfilling orders, you will be answering questions. You may have fears and things that you're doing, which are full on events. So that, kind of doing as much as you can in advance so that it's almost like the marketing side takes care of itself. And it's just you get it out there rather than having to think about, okay, well, I need to shoot this, and this, and make these 10 things and pack and post these orders. You just want to be focusing on engaging with your customers and fulfilling those orders.
Absolutely. And if you are worried about the overwhelm, definitely have a listen to last week's podcast because we kind of break it down and
Mhm.
cover what we should be focusing on each week. But now it's photography time. So hopefully you have felt inspired. Thank you so much, Karen, for coming and
My
sharing some
pleasure.
tips with us today to go and do a shoot and explore and have some fun with your photography. We would absolutely love everyone to get involved in the challenge whether it's using your smartphone or not. You may think, well, actually, I do most of my photography with a camera. That's fine. The challenge is for everyone. And it's just a nice way for us to kind of be together as a community at the start of this quarter and share and encourage each other around our socials, around our photography as well. And check out Karen's course and make sure you get it before the offer ends. We also have another course with Karen. Anyone listening thinking that all sounds great, but I really want to learn photography using a camera, we have a more in-depth camera-based photography course as well, which is available now. You can go and get anytime on our website. So we'll make sure that there's a link to all of those things in the show notes. Best of luck with your photography. And Karen, just one more time, if anyone wants to come follow you, check out your photo shoot packages and all those kind of things, where is the best place for them to find and connect with you online?
You can find me at Karen Young Photography.
There's a
.co.uk.
couple.
Too many accounts. And KarenYoungPhotography.co.uk.
Awesome. We will make sure they're in the show notes too. So thanks again. Lovely to see everyone. Have a wonderful week, and we'll look forward to being here again next week. Bye for now.
Bye now.